From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I am Soini Gray. In Peru, protests derailed a meeting between social actors, high-level representatives of government, and OAS Secretary General Luis Almagro. The event took place a day before the opening of the 8th Summit of the Americas. It took a turn as demonstrations began at the meeting hall, with attendees from Cuba, Venezuela, El Salvador, and Bolivia rejecting the exclusion of the Cuban delegation, saying that all access and participation has been systematically blocked. Cuban Ambassador Juan Antonio Fernandez denounced the hypocrisy of the scheduled forum, in which members of civil society delegations were expected to be given an opportunity to meet face-to-face with high-level government representatives, only to find out that a number of people with no official accreditation, brought presumably to speak against the governments of Cuba and Venezuela, were somehow allowed to participate.
The presidency adjourned the meeting, but then he took a number of people who he invited to another room to continue dialogue. What is clear is that in this forum, they can't speak or hold a session. There's a lot of hypocrisy in this. They speak of dialogue, of democracy, and there's an absence. Venezuela isn't here. You can't in the world with a double standard. Nor can a vision be imposed on us of a group of mercenaries paid for by the United States.
Cuba's delegation had an intense morning during the 8th Summit of the Americas. The island's representative defended their position in favor of the revolution and firmly disagreed with anti-Cuban groups. Our correspondent Elian Fernandez tells us more in the next reports.
Cubans lived a real political battle today, during the Summit of the Americas, where civil society and political representatives from countries of the region participated. Cuba's delegation stated that they won't share any space with people linked to anti-Cuban terrorism or those who call for regime change on the island. They called for regional integration, rejected the decision of keeping Venezuela away from the summit, and then refused to let the session continue. Juan Antonio Fernandez, Cuba's representative, was clear about his rejection of anti-revolutionary individuals or groups, so this reaction was expected. This went on for most of the morning, until OAS Secretary General, some government representatives and well-protected anti-Cuban groups left through the back door, while Cuba's delegation was singing the island's anthem. Cubans see today's actions as the defense of the rights of a society which totally supports the revolution.
Also being held this week in Lima is the People's Summit, where participants from social movements are meeting to discuss key issues which organizers say will be ignored at the high-level government meetings. Venezuela, which was excluded from the Summit of the Americas, has been present at the People's Summit, with the Venezuelan National Constituent Assembly member Maria Alejandra Diaz among the participants. Today at the Construction Workers Federation headquarters.
Why attack Venezuela? Venezuela is an anomaly within the capitalist system because the constitution of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela is anti-neoliberal. That's why they're attacking, because the constitution calls for the redistribution of wealth.
Now moving to Brazil, where 5 days have passed since former president and current electoral front-runner for the Workers' Party, Luiz Ignacio Lula da Silva, was detained. Our correspondent Andrea Vieira has the latest from Curitiba in the south of the country.
We're following the actions of Lula supporters mobilizing for Lula da Silva. We are outside the Federal Police building where Lula is serving his sentence. 3 of his sons and his grandson have visited him this morning. This was the first visit he received since last Saturday's detention. We'll show you now the building. This is located in the state of Paraná. A group of lawyers also visited Lula to make sure that he's living in the correct conditions. New mobilizations are expected for today in Curitiba, as well as other cities. For example, Brasilia. People are building a permanent camp there and asking the judges to evaluate the situation of those imprisoned after a second-level court ruling.
We thank Andrew Vieira for that report. Members of Congress from Brazil's left-wing parties are also taking action in solidarity with Lula. They are blocking parliamentary business, and a group of senators will go to Curitiba to investigate the limitations placed on visits to Lula.
The Human Rights Committee of the Brazilian Senate has decided that some of its members should evaluate the conditions in which the former president Lula da Silva is being detained. So next Tuesday, a group of lawmakers will be heading to Curitiba.
A delegation of senators will go to look at Lula's situation there in Curitiba, because he's being held in isolation, without visits. 9 governors went to see him and weren't admitted, although they have the right. So these senators should go and see the conditions in which President Lula is being held, because Lula is now a political prisoner.
Earlier on Thursday, some of Lula's relatives were allowed a visit. Nonetheless, the senators say the isolation measures violate basic principles of human rights, not least Lula's right to dignity.
The worst thing about these restrictions is that visits are only being allowed for his lawyers, who obviously are working on his case, and close relatives. But the law is clear. Visits are included for the prisoner's partners, spouses, and friends. On what grounds is this judge preventing them? He has no grounds, and that's another reason why we need to go.
In the lower house, the opposition has decided to block proceedings and not pass any legislation until Lula is freed and democracy restored.
We in the House of Representatives will not allow this situation to pass for normal. We won't let the parliament work normally. The Workers' Party group is blocking everything. And we have the support of the PDT, the PSB, the Communist Party of Brazil, and the PSOL, who are blocking things with us. So it's not any specific project we're blocking. It's a political boycott.
On top of this, 60 members of Congress have asked to include Lula in their official parliamentary names, in solidarity with the jailed leader. This means that each time the Speaker calls them, their name will be called as Lula, and Lula's name will appear constantly on the electronic voting board.
In Trinidad and Tobago, LGBT activists are celebrating a landmark ruling calling a pre-colonial law outlawing buggery unconstitutional, thereby decriminalizing homosexuality in the country. Justice Devendra Rampasad declared Section 13 of the Sexual Offences Act null and void. It means that part of the law will eventually be struck down completely. Activists gathered outside the Hall of Justice as they awaited the decision on the law, which essentially criminalizes homosexuality in the country. The challenge was brought by the activist Jason Jones. Pro and anti-LGBT activists have been staging demonstrations all week in anticipation of today's ruling.
People have been saying for the last year it's the Rosa Parks moment for us. And I think that now there is something very tangible for us to move forward with that will incentivize people. I've seen incredible things happening on the ground, particularly on Monday when they were in front of Parliament. I think now people have an idea that, you know, we can effect change. And though I acted independently with this matter, which was for very strategic legal reasons, I fully intend to work with local groups and Equal Opportunity Commission to start looking at least finally getting inclusion in the Equal Opportunity Act.
But celebrations may be short-lived, as Attorney General Faris Al-Rawi has given instructions to appeal the High Court ruling that the sodomy law is unconstitutional. Minister in the Ministry of Legal Affairs, Stuart Young, made the announcement to reporters shortly after the ruling. He said he did not want to comment further on the ruling since he had not seen it. He also declined to comment more on constitutional reform.
the portfolio of housing and urban development.
To better discuss the Justice Rampersad ruling in the Jones versus the Attorney General case, we're being joined live by Colin Robinson of the Coalition Advocating for the Inclusion of Sexual Orientation, CAISO, which was part of the Alliance for Justice and Diversity, the group which organized a demonstration on Monday to support Jason Jones in this landmark case. Colin, thank you so much for joining us. Tell me something. I understand the ruling is that essentially homosexuality has been decriminalized in Trinidad and Tobago, but some people are saying that is not the case. How do you understand today's ruling?
Yes, but that's not all the ruling does. Prior to the ruling, not just homosexual acts, but any form of anal sex was criminalized. Anal sex between men and women has also been decriminalized as of this morning. What's not final is how the court will reword the statutes that applied both to consensual and non-consensual acts in public and private so that it conforms with the Constitution. That, after hearing submissions, the judge will make a ruling on in early July.
And tell me something. I understand that while people wanted a positive outcome for this case, a lot of people were kind of holding back their enthusiasm and they weren't exactly prepared for today's result. How is today's result making you feel?
A lot of folks just don't know what to feel because I didn't expect us to win. And I've been reflecting that in fact is the power of the buggery law, that it never prevented me from having sex, but it prevented me from imagining that a court in Trinidad and Tobago could deliver justice, could uphold equality for gay and lesbian people.
Okay, thank you so much, Colin. We had to keep this very short and very sweet, but I'm very glad that you're very happy to be able to live your full and free life now. Thank you so much for joining us. We've been speaking to Colin Robinson of CAISO about the LGBT decision. The Justice Rampersad saying that Section 13 of the Sexual Offences Act was null and void. Now, LGBT groups are asking Commonwealth heads to prioritize the decriminalization of homosexualities in 37 member states. They presented a petition with over 100,000 signatories to the Commonwealth Secretariat in London. The Commonwealth heads of government are due to meet in London from April 16th to 20th. And according to the activists, 70% of member state nations are bastions of prejudice, decriminalized discrimination and violence. They're calling on the Commonwealth heads to decriminalize same-sex relations, prohibit gender and sexual discrimination, protect LGBT persons from violence, and to consult with LGBT organizations.
The Commonwealth is made up of...
And Caribbean diplomats are coming together to condemn the treatment of many long-term Commonwealth-born UK residents by the Home Office. The diplomats are referring to individuals who arrived from Caribbean countries as children in the 1950s and 1960s and who were never formally naturalized. Now, those people are being called illegal and are being denied health services, jobs, and face detention or deportation. Diplomats called on the UK government to adopt a more compassionate approach by announcing a window during which people in this situation would be fast-tracked to getting their papers. We're going to take a short break now, but join us again after a look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. Political violence against female candidates in Mexico's elections has claimed another victim. On Wednesday, 25-year-old candidate for the Green Party, Maribel Barajas, was found dead in the western state of Michoacan. The body of Barajas was found severely beaten and with knife wounds. The Green Party has urged Mexican authorities to confirm that Barajas was murdered and that other Green Party candidates can campaign safely. One of Barajas' colleagues has launched a video highlighting the risk to female politicians in the country.
Ahora resulta que ser joven en este país es hasta peligroso.
Being young is also dangerous in this country. Maribel Barajas was just 25 years old, as I am. Maribel Barajas was a candidate for the same party I am running for. Maribel Barajas could be me or any of us. And what are the Mexican authorities doing to guarantee our safety as young women candidates? They are failing. They are failing to guarantee our safety.
Dozens of Honduran migrants have demonstrated at their embassy in Mexico City to demand the government of Juan Orlando Hernandez stop violence and political persecution. The ambassador for Honduras in Mexico City, Alden Rivera, came out and was greeted with hugs, but also lots of questions and complaints. Rivera said that the government will grant humanitarian help and legal assistance to improve migrants' legal status. And the FARC political party in Colombia has protested outside the offices of the Special Peace Jurisdiction to demand the release of their member Jesus Santrich. Members of the former guerrilla movement are demanding that the department, which was part of the peace agreement signed with the government, takes over Santrich's case. The senior member, who was a signatory of the peace accord, was arrested after the U.S. accused him of drug trafficking. They criticized President Juan Manuel Santos for not fulfilling the deal signed in Havana in 2016.
Once the special jurisdiction of peace takes over this process, we demand the annulment of the whole process, meaning the annulment of the arrest, the annulment of the actions taken by a judicial authority like the General Attorney's Office, which had no right to do so.
Colombian presidential candidate Gustavo Petro says he will focus on narrowing the country's yawning gap between rich and poor if elected. The 57-year-old leftist economist, who was mayor of Bogota from 2011 to 2013, ranked second in polls to replace President Juan Manuel Santos. He says he will change the country's economic model by taxing owners of unproductive land and shifting away from fossil fuels.
A government of the Humana Party will be a government that says to the world we want to progressively separate ourselves from carbon and oil. Why? Because we want to fight against climate change and because it helps us in the transition towards a productive economy, to build our own peace and democracy. Because carbon and oil, those easy dollars that generate enormous wave of corruption, don't create an economy that includes the whole population.
The Supreme Court of Colombia has confirmed it will investigate the former president, Álvaro Uribe, who is accused of corruption. In 2012, Uribe accused Senator Iván Cepeda of seeking the support of paramilitary members and getting them to turn against him. Now, the court has cleared Cepeda of providing false witnesses and in a turn of events has now accused Uribe. Cepeda leaves a group of victims seeking justice for crimes against humanity, some of which were committed during the government of Uribe in Colombia during the period of 2002 to 2010. In a little more than a month, Venezuelans will head to the polls to vote in the country's presidential election. However, after a no-vote abstention campaign led by the country's opposition bloc, the MOOD, candidates have their work cut out for them. Freddie Gillingham has more.
Some of Venezuela's presidential candidates are taking to the streets. Henry Falcon, the only serious contender to the incumbent president Nicolas Maduro, is trying to drum up support. Generating a pre-election buzz with his supporters in Maracay this week was the main objective. Although some supporters did come out to greet Falcon, he does not have nearly as much support as he would like. Some other opposition leaders have been calling for abstention in May's election, and Falcon is fully aware of the dangers that poses for his campaign.
On the streets, what we are feeling is that this is growing as a snowball, that is going to be a true encounter, a national celebration, as soon as we can offer the world a new government.
Over in Caracas, the president of the country's National Electoral Council, Tibase Lucena, was outlining the rules and regulations ahead of May 20th. She insisted there will be no change of date, despite continual calls from the opposition.
We have considered all the requests. We saw it, but it is not in the plans of the Electoral National Council. A change on the dates. There is going to be an election on May 20th, a presidential election and the regional legislative council's elections.
Campaigning is set to begin officially on April 20th. Freddie Gillingham, Telesur, Caracas.
And Venezuela's opposition president candidate Henry Falcon, who we just saw in that report, has now taken his campaign to the city of Valencia. He told voters there he would win and promised them that he would pay salaries in dollars. What he didn't say is where he would get the foreign currency from.
Nicolás Maduro has been defeated because of his incompetency.
But the Venezuelan opposition has not mobilized.
The Venezuelan opposition is 82% of the country that rejects the government of Nicolás Maduro. The opposition is not about one or two parties. The opposition is the people who are suffering from hunger.
According to recent polls, Nicolás Maduro is 10 points ahead of you.
We are 20 points ahead in the polls. The world must know that he has lost.
The United States has said a final decision on military strikes in Syria has not been taken. This after President Donald Trump tweeted on Wednesday that missiles were on the way. The White House spokeswoman Sarah Sanders says Trump has not laid out a timetable for action in response to an alleged chemical attack in Syria. She added that all options were on the table and that the president is assessing how to respond. She also commented on the state of the U.S. relationship with Russia.
So they certainly hold some responsibility in this.
In response to Trump's social media saber rattling, Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova has pointed out the contradiction between the U.S. president's hot-tempered campaign against fake news and his eagerness to launch a military strike based on unverified information.
The noise is from the mouth of the leadership of the United States of America, primarily from the U.S. president, who was the first person who had announced a crusade against fake news, against information dumps, against information which instead serves as disinformation. How can he, realizing the price of false information, take the most responsible decisions regarding the use of force against a sovereign state without having a real picture of what actually happened?
Trump has taken to Twitter yet again and explained that he never said when a possible attack on Syria would take place. He added this could happen soon or not so soon at all. Meanwhile, top officials in the United Kingdom have agreed on the need to take actions in Syria, and they said they have not said if that means military action. Prime Minister Theresa May called a cabinet meeting to decide on the government's position. The opposition Labour Party has opposed military action and says it would need approval from Parliament. The anti-war movement in Britain is preparing protests for Friday.
And our allies in recent weeks has shown a clear acknowledgement of the shared threat Russia poses to our security.
And some breaking news from here in Ecuador. The organization Fundamedios says it has received photographs from the Colombian media that show that the 3 Ecuadorian journalists kidnapped on the border are dead. Telesur has not seen the photographs and their deaths have not been confirmed by official sources. And we end this newscast with some good news for our viewers watching in the Caribbean. Trinidad and Tobago's Jeremy Richards has won a gold medal in the men's 200-meter final at the 2018 Gold Coast Commonwealth Games in Australia. He is the first male to win the title for the country since 1970. Richards clocked 20.12 seconds. The win was not without a moment of controversy, as Zonell Hughes, who was originally given gold despite having the exact same time, was disqualified for knocking Richards with his hand just before they crossed the finish line.
Hughes looks over and manages to maintain his composure.
And there's been another victory for Caribbean sportsmen. Grenada's Lyndon Victor has won his first and the country's fourth gold medal at the Commonwealth Games. He scored 8,303 points to secure the decathlon gold medal. He became the first athlete from Grenada to win in this event. Victor's tally is the best score in the Commonwealth Games since 1998. And that sports story has brought us to the end of this news brief. But for these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at talisutv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Talisio English, I'm Sonia Gray. Thank you so much for watching.